Review. Luca Drago, man of the Mafia, is already emerging from the prologue as an ambitious story, with a strong stylistic identity and a clear direction, exploring the formation of an individual in an environment dominated by violence, loyalty, and power. The text is not just a simple narrative about the Mafia, but rather a meditation on human transformation, the loss of innocence and the cold mechanisms that govern survival in a universe devoid of traditional morality. From the very first lines, the author manages to create an oppressive and cinematic atmosphere. Naples is not just a setting, but a living, almost hostile organism that shapes destinies. The image of the city, with the smoke of the refineries, the salty air of the bay and the bells that ring in mourning, creates a constant tension. It is a space where childhood does not exist in its usual form, but is replaced by a forced, brutal maturation. The choice of this setting works excellently, because it gives credibility and density to the story. The main character, Luca Drago, is built with remarkable clarity. We are not dealing with a classic hero, but with a product of his environment, a child raised between fear and the need to overcome it. The promise made by his mother, not to be afraid, becomes a defining leitmotif. It is interesting how this idea is not romanticized, but transformed into a defense mechanism, into a psychological weapon. Courage is not presented as a virtue, but as a condition for survival. One of the most powerful elements of the prologue is the way the author treats violence. It is not spectacular or glorified gratuitously, but is presented as cold mathematics. This metaphor is extremely effective because it redefines the perception of violent acts. They are no longer impulsive, but calculated, almost inevitable. Luca kills not out of pleasure nor out of hatred, but out of a kind of internal logic, built over time. This approach makes him a fascinating, but also unsettling character. The moment of the first murder is particularly important in the construction of the character, even if it is treated relatively quickly. The fact that the victim is a friend adds a tragic dimension and highlights the degradation of human relationships in such an environment. However, from a narrative perspective, this moment could be developed more. It is an opportunity to deepen Luca's inner conflict, to show not only the outcome, but also the process, the hesitation, the tension, the emotional rupture. The relationship with Don Marcello introduces a classic archetype, the figure of the underworld mentor. But what differentiates this relationship is the emphasis on discipline and intelligence. Luca is not just an executor, but becomes a refined instrument, a scalpel of the clan. This metaphor is one of the most successful in the text, as it suggests precision, control, and a lack of emotion. Luca's transformation from child to weapon is gradual and believable, supported by various trainings, from weapons to Stoic philosophy. This detail adds depth and suggests that real power comes not only from strength, but also from mental control. The appearance of Giulia Doni marks a turning point in the story. She is introduced with an aura of mystery and authority, without resorting to excessive explanations. She is the kind of character who dominates the scene through presence, not through direct action. The relationship between Luca and Giulia is one of the most promising directions of the novel. It is not a relationship based on dialogue or declarations, but on silence and implicit understanding. Luca's devotion takes on a new dimension. It is no longer just to the clan, but to a person who seems to represent an ideal. However, at this stage, Giulia is more of a symbol than a fully developed character. It functions as a projection of order and meaning in a chaotic world. For the relationship to become truly memorable, it would be necessary for it to acquire more human traits, perhaps even vulnerabilities. A character who is too perfect risks becoming distant and difficult to connect with emotionally. Stylistically, the text impresses with its consistency and ambition. The language is rich, sometimes poetic, with strong images and well-chosen metaphors. However, there is a risk that the stylistic density becomes tiring. Almost every sentence is loaded with meaning, which reduces the impact of key moments. A balance between simplicity and complexity could improve the pace of the reading and allow the reader to breathe between intense moments. The content of the novel suggests a broad and well-thought-out structure. The chapter titles are suggestive and create anticipation. The Crown of Shadows, The Mirror Network, The Shadow Code, or The Shadow of Azrael indicate a complex evolution of the story, with political, psychological, and strategic ramifications. An expansion of the action beyond the initial space is observed, which promises a large-scale development, possibly even international. Another interesting aspect is the thematic direction suggested by titles such as Infiltration of the Vatican or Fire in the Balkans. These indicate a shift from local conflicts to global ones, which can transform the story into a complex thriller, with geopolitical implications. If this direction is developed coherently, the novel has the potential to exceed the boundaries of the classic Mafia genre. The theme of identity is also central. Luca is not just a Mafia man, but an individual in a continuous redefinition. From the child who learns not to be afraid, to the perfect instrument of the clan, and further to the possible architect of a new era. His journey is one of constant transformation. The question that emerges is whether there is still a human core inside this character, or whether it has been completely replaced by the function he performs. A strong point of the text is the lack of explicit moralizing. The author does not judge the characters and does not offer easy answers. The reader is left to observe, interpret, and decide. This approach gives maturity to the narrative and brings it closer to quality literature, where ambiguity is a tool, not a weakness. In conclusion, Luca Drago, Man of the Mafia, is an extremely promising start for a novel that aims to explore the psychological depth of a character formed in extreme conditions. The atmosphere, style, and narrative direction are well defined, and the main character is complex enough to support a long-term story. With a few tweaks, especially in balancing the style and fleshing out key moments, This project has the potential to become not just a gripping story, but a memorable one. It's the kind of beginning that doesn't just tell a story. It promises a whole world.